The door shouldn't have known my name, but it sighed when I touched it. At 2:03 in the morning, Kinner Corporate was a cathedral to fluorescent ghosts. The city glowed below like a patient watched through glass, rain stippling. The windows with the soft insistence of someone tapping to be let in. Most floors slept with their lights dimmed to polite, but the corridor where I stood was sterilized. Noon, brushed steel, clean seams, the kind of silence that includes a hum if you are honest about it. There was no 23rd floor on the visitor map. On the internal one, it had a label only someone like me would find funny: storage. The hallway disagreed. No boxes, no dust, no scuff marks from the hands of men who move heavy things. Only the wall with a seam that wasn't a seam, and the faintest trace of warmth hidden behind it, like a breath held too long. I wore black gloves and a charcoal suit that made the night feel underdressed. The gloves were habit. People say they're a fashion choice. They're armor. I pressed my palm to the seam I wasn't supposed to know, and felt the lock recognize my skin the way old oaths remember your voice. The metal loosened. A nearly inaudible click, a hush like an apology. Don't. The voice came from behind me. Quiet, as if the owner respected the hour in the building. Military, in the way some words come pre-ironed. I didn't startle. The trick to appearing unflappable is practice. I turned slowly, villain in a tasteful indie film, and met the man security had poached. With a salary that sounded like a pharmaceutical side effect, Christopher Hale. He filled doorways by existing. Not just tall, structured, shoulders that made architecture nervous, a jaw designed to cut rope, a face the city would have trusted in a riot. His suit was navy so dark it was almost a rumor, crisp as a pressed promise. He carried quiet like an extra weapon. You couldn't sleep? I asked. Try chamomile. Or a conscience. Step away from the door, Mr. Levin. He didn't raise his voice. The air obeyed anyway. Technically it's a wall, I said, because I am at my best when being insufferable. And technically, I am head of legal. Walls and I get along. You don't have clearance for this floor. I helped write the policies that say I do. I wiggled my gloved fingers. Not to brag, but my signatures have their own barcodes. Step away. And if I don't? I tilted my head. You'll file an incident report? Please do. They read like bad haiku. Employee. Night. Door. Very evocative. He didn't move at me the way some alphas would, loud and blunt and sure the earth owed them an aisle. He approached like a patient man approaching a wire he can't see. The corridor shrank its lungs around us. At 3 steps, he stopped. Close enough for the emergency lights to calcify. His cheekbones, far enough that HR would still only raised an eyebrow. Something impossible happened then. Small as a note tapped from a piano you'd bolted shut. The scent rose off my wrist, where the glove cuff didn't quite meet the sleeve, a thumbprint of rain hitting hot asphalt, a string of rosemary, the dry patience of ink on a signature line. Every day for 10 years I have smelled like citrus soap and stainless steel. Every day for 10 years, the building has. Our bodies learned to mimic policy. But the air, traitor that it is, remembered me. Christopher breathed in, not a gasp, a recalibration. His pupils shifted, tightened, and blossomed, a reflex fighting a memory it had been ordered to forget. His hand lifted, stopped short of my wrist like his palm recognized heat it didn't trust. No, he said softly, to himself, as if correcting a misprint in a holy text. I haven't scented. He looked at me like the end of a drought looks at a cloud. Years. Decade, I said. Roughly. But who's counting? My mouth was casual. My spine remembered an old choir of sirens, and the finite architecture of a burning stairwell. Are you wearing blockers? He said it clinically, a doctor with a religious problem. That's a serious question to ask a colleague in a corridor with cameras, I said. Would you like me to consult HR's handbook on intrusive inquiries? It's right between don't howl in the stairwell and no biting in copy rooms. You're deflecting. I'm reframing. It's our version of prayer. Behind me, the lock finished unlatching itself with the soft courtesy of a well-trained butler. The seam opened a fraction, enough for cold air to kiss my gloved knuckles. A sound leaked out. Not a mechanical sound. Paper at rest. Shelves holding their breath. Memory, when you wake it by name. Christopher's eyes cut to the opening. "What is this floor?" "Storage," I said blandly. He smiled without humor. "You're not funny." "I'm wildly funny." "You're busy." The elevator chimed somewhere down the hall. Routine returning to a building that disliked odd numbers. I took my hand off the seam. The door closed obediently, like a cat pretending it hadn't wanted your attention anyway. "You're investigating the leak," I said, shaking my cuff back into line. "Good, investigate. While you're doing that, a polite reminder that we're bleeding contracts. And whoever's cutting the veins knows where we keep the arteries." He stepped to the side to block the elevator sightline I'd been angling for. Not aggressive, merely competent. "What were you trying to access?" "A fire extinguisher," I said. "At 2 in the morning. Fires don't please reply." He stared at me for 1 second too long. The alpha thing is mostly posture. And he had enough to chair a committee. But what lived in his stare wasn't dominance. It was inventory. He was measuring, weighing, cataloging the version of me that had just, however briefly, smelled like a life. "Mr. Levin," he said finally, and my name sounded like a tool in his mouth. "If you are tampering with restricted infrastructure, I will." "Put me in detention?" I smiled thin. "I'm head of legal. Detention is literally my office." 8 a.m., he said. "My office. I'll be there in a different tie. Try to keep up." The elevator doors opened their stainless mouth. He didn't try to stop me. I didn't run. Running is what prey does. And I, by policy and practice and a decade of careful contracts, am not prey. As I stepped inside, the building threw a flicker at me. An edit, a spliced frame from an older reel, my own bare hands, slick with someone else's night, heat clawing the paint off the exit sign. A voice I loved yelling "don't." The precise click of a lock waking to my palm. The scent of burnt wiring and rosemary. A sacrament I'd made myself swallow. I kept my face blank. The doors slid shut with the dignity of something that has seen worse and still obeys. He didn't move. He stood in the hum of a floor that wasn't supposed to exist, and watched the elevator swallow me. His expression had shifted, not softened. Consideration is not soft. He looked like a man deciding between prayer and surgery. As the car pulled downward through the ribcage of the building, the after scent clung to my throat. The first minute of a storm given back. I inhaled it once, and then pressed it down the way you press down a memory, until it becomes furniture. I am good at this. I have been practicing for 10 years. On the ground floor, a custodial cart squeaked in apology as it passed. The security guard at the desk lifted a hand because I am the kind of man a night guard recognizes. The one who lives here more than he lives anywhere else. I tipped 2 fingers, and kept walking. In the mirrored lobby, rain walked itself into vertical lines. I looked like a roomer in a black suit. The gloves meant I could touch nothing, and leave nothing behind. That is their purpose. I adjusted the knot of my tie and, for a heartbeat, the elevator doors behind me reflected him where no one stood. The mind does that when it wants things. The city breathed wet outside. Umbrellas bloomed. Somewhere above, 23 kept its secret politely. My pulse finally remembered its job. He had looked at me like I'd just opened something far older than a door. Morning makes the building pretend it's human. Sunlight rinses the glass. The coffee machines sing their bright little dirges, and the lobby plants straighten up like they're on probation. The legal floor wakes at 7:30, to the sound of shoes being polite on polished concrete. My office is a terrarium for restraint. Clean lines, cold light. Nothing soft except the hush. The desk is dark wood with a temper. The chairs are comfortable enough to keep you honest. The shelves hold more statute than literature, but the spines line up like soldiers. The only personal photo is a black and white cityscape that looks like a heartbeat if you squint. The gloves sit in their place, palm up, like well-trained pets. Milo is already there, because the devil sends interns early. He's perched on the edge of the guest chair with a notebook on one knee. and a coffee the size of my forearm in the other, a constellation of freckles bright as punctuation across his nose. "Morning, Mr. Levin," he says, and then inhales theatrically. "Huh? You don't smell like anything." He blinks, as if surprised by his own words. "I mean, no offense, sir, but usually everyone smells like, something, soap, fabric softener, corporate compliance. I'm delighted to embody the NDA, I say, setting my briefcase down. And to answer your next two questions, yes, that's deliberate. No, it's not because I'm a vampire." He looks relieved, and then disappointed. "Right. Because sunlight." "Exactly. It ruins my suits." He scribbles that down for reasons that remain between Milo and the god of interns. "You heard security's changing protocols? Rumor says the new guy is intense. Rumor should get a day job." I open my laptop and wake up a spreadsheet that could double as a slow-acting sedative. "Where's Ms. Park?" "Haunting HR. She said to tell you she will return with the heads of her enemies, or scones, whichever the break room had." He flips a page. "Also, the copier jammed on page 13 of the CFO's slide deck, so please consider the number 13 cursed." "It always was," I say. "It's the number that invented synergy." I sign a digital brief with a stylus that knows me too well. The signature blooms with the neat impatience that I trained into my hand a decade ago. Milo watches me work with the sort of reverence people used to bring to cathedrals. "Is it true you can read a contract and tell which paragraph will ruin a man's week?" "Not just his week." I point to a clause with the stylus. "That one ruins Thanksgivings." A shadow darkens my doorway like a polite eclipse. Ms. Park glides in, unwrapping a scarf as if she's unsheathing a blade. 50-something and engineered from metronomes and steel, she moves with the exactitude of a train schedule that has never once apologized. 11, she says by way of affection, depositing a folder and a wax paper bag that turns out to be scones. "Sugar. You didn't eat last night." I know this because the cleaning crew reported a carnivorous laptop light and a haunted executive hallway. I was communing with my inbox. "Your inbox does not love you back." She turns to Milo. "What did you tell him?" "That you were getting heads or scones." She considers, then tips her chin. "Scones were cheaper." Milo inhales again, nose wrinkling. "Miss Park, do you smell—" "Do not finish that sentence," she says, not unkindly. "If you cannot name a scent in a court of law, you cannot name it in my hallway." He shrinks by 2 inches. "Yes, ma'am." She softens by 2 millimeters, which in Miss Park is a hug. "Good boy." Her gaze flicks back to me, pinning me like a moth. Hale is digging. Under carpets and in teacups. "Good," I say. "We're missing silverware." "He's digging under you," she clarifies. "You are not a teacup." "I can be," I say. "If it helps morale." She ignores that. "If he asks for your schedule, give him nothing. If he asks you a question about protocol, give him everything. If he asks what you were doing at 2:03 a.m., tell him you were teaching a seminar on nocturnal ethics." "Did I invite him?" "You don't invite men like that," she says. "You build railings and hope." She's right, which is one of her most annoying qualities. Before I can reply, the floor quiets with the specific hush people use when someone with rank walks by. There's nothing like power to turn conversation into mime. Christopher Hale stops in my doorway with his hands in his pockets, like a man checking what weapons he isn't using. Up close in daylight, he's less myth and more fact. Faint scar along the jaw like a dash where someone forgot the rest of a sentence. Sleeves that fit like they approve of his shoulders, eyes an ordinary blue that becomes less ordinary when he's deciding where to place you on a map. "Mr. Levin," he says. "Ms. Park." "Captain," she says coolly. Even though that's not his rank here, and never was. She excuses herself with the efficient violence of a paper cut. "If you two start a fire, do it near a sprinkler." Milo looks between us like a tennis match he is not qualified to umpire. "Should I?" "Yes," we both say. And he flees with a speed that suggests he will return with either coffee or a small fire extinguisher. I gesture to the chair. "Would you like to sit?" He doesn't. He steps into the office as if measuring it for threats, and then fixes on me as if deciding I qualify. Last night, you violated protocol. I don't violate, I say, folding my hands. I edit. Impressive line, he says. Does it work on doors? It worked on you. Something almost like amusement moves his mouth and then decides to behave. We're revising access rosters for restricted floors. We? I lift a brow. Security? Ah, the collective pronoun. It suits you. His gaze flicks to the gloves deliberately drawing on the coaster near my keyboard, and then back to my face. You still haven't told me why an unlisted door opened when you touched it. You still haven't told me why you were haunting an unlisted floor after hours, I say. Do we both like the ambiance? Mr. Levin. He doesn't sigh. He lets the room know sighing is an option. If you're fishing, I say, you'll need a quieter boat. He takes a moment. The courtesy before a scalpel. Have you ever considered that formality is just fear with a necktie? Every day, I say. It's why my neckties are memorable. They have to do all the emotional labor. He ignores the bait, which is rude. There was an incident report 10 years ago, he says, with your name in the margins, more than the center. The period that followed saw an immediate drop in scent-triggered altercations, a sharp decline in instinct-related disciplinary actions, and a corresponding spike in productivity. If I were a certain type of man, I'd call that a miracle. And, if you were the type of man you are? I ask. I call it a switch someone flipped, he says. I'm looking for the switch. The electrical closet is down the hall, I say. Do not let the circuit breakers flirt with you. We look at each other, the part of the conversation where neither of us is allowed to breathe too loudly, because then it becomes something that would require paperwork. He's closer than yesterday. Daylight makes him less invincible and somehow more precise. The chemical hum that is my life in this building stays flat and clean at the register we taught it. Even so, my treacherous body remembers the way his pupils changed last night, and the memory stands up like a cat and arches its back. He leans his knuckles on the chair back, angled toward the window. I'll be checking your department. Audits, night logs, access anomalies, interviews. You'll enjoy our coffee, I say. It tastes like litigation. And I'll be checking you, he adds, letting that land without violence. Just fact. You'll find a calendar with feelings and a desk that forgives nothing. He smiles properly, the kind that doesn't make you feel conquered. So I've heard. A silence long enough to grow a decision. He straightens. Yesterday. You asked what I'd do if you didn't step away. I remember. I won't threaten you, he says. And the lack of threat is an excellent one. I'll read you. Thoroughly. Oh, Captain. I spread my hands over the desk like a magician revealing his absence of trick. Then start with the part of me that's least redacted. His eyes flick past me to the window, where the city is busy with its illusions. He steps back into the doorway, profile clean as a stamp, and gives me that measured military nod they must teach with marching. I'll start with your department, he says. And you. I tilt my head, polite as a blade. Then start with a mirror, Mr. Hale. Night shifts the building into a different language. Daytime is emails and calendars, and the hourly prayer of coffee. Night is cameras and reflections, and the mechanical breath of the elevator counting floors like rosary beads. At 11, most of legal goes home pretending their work won't follow them into sleep. I wait until 1 to admit that mine never left. The security office is 2 floors down from us, a box of screens with a hum that gives you the sense of bees working without a queen. I don't go there. I don't need to. The building surfaces are generous with secrets if you treat your reflection like a witness. In the dark glass by the conference rooms, you can see the glow of feeds ripple faintly. Grainy. Corridors, elevator mouths. A stairwell where the motion detector takes its job too seriously. At 1:30, a hallway monitor on my floor catches a quiet change. The angle shifts. The frame centers on the legal lobby, instead of the elevators, and one camera blinks into sharper focus, as if someone adjusted a lens with careful fingers. Hello, Captain. I let the cleaning crew pass. I let the intern night staff with his earbuds and his algebra homework drift through like a ghost who believes in grades. Then I choose the moment between two elevator dings, and step into the field of view as if I'm late to my own alibi. I straighten a picture frame that doesn't need straightening. I pick lint from my lapel that does not exist. I turn my head just enough to show profile, then full face, then the gloves. Black, clean, the corporate equivalent of a held breath. Somewhere, I can feel him watching. It's not telepathy. We haven't gotten that far down the rabbit hole. It's the prickling knowledge of attention, the way you sense a hawk without seeing the shadow. I offer the camera a small, bored smile. The kind that reads, "Nothing to see here, officer, except everything." My phone vibrates. One message from Milo, time-stamped 1:42 a.m., found something dumb and scary. Doors can be haunted, right? PLS say yes. I text back, haunted is extra budgetary. What did you find? 10 seconds and a torrent arrives. Photos of a terminal dump, a column of timestamps, and the line. He circled in red like a crime of punctuation. 203. Access, success, credential, null. I stare until it blurs, then blink it clear. The exact minute from last night, when the door sighed under my palm like a tired animal. No card, no code, just the building remembering me. Where did you pull this? I type. Not telling in case I go to prison, Milo replies. Logs are weird. Some lines rewritten like a Word doc? Who edits access logs? Gremlins with badges, I send back. Go home. Sleep. I am at home. The office is my home, he writes, then adds, JK. Ms. Park would kill me. Correct. I tuck the phone away, and let my eyes adjust to the camera's red dot, imagining Christopher on the other end, leaning into the glow, reading me as if I'm a memo he plans to argue with later. At 2, the elevators argue with gravity, in their polite way. I walk into one without checking if it's a trap. If he wants to intercept me, he will. The car descends, we change our minds, it climbs. Floors scroll past the sensible ones, past the labeled ones. Stop. The doors open to the unnumbered hallway. Even without the lights, it is cleaner than anything dead has a right to be. The seam door waits, more patient than a person, less forgiving than a god. I walk toward it, and let the building test the weight of my steps. The camera's eating the angles like a nervous habit. You're predictable, he says behind me. And I don't jump, because I have a reputation to keep and because I wasn't trying to avoid him. He steps out of the darkness, the way sentences step out of paragraphs when you quote them. He's in the same navy suit as this morning, or another identical one. Men like him have a closet like a rank. His tie is loosened by exactly one regulation. Only to professionals, I say. Don't flatter yourself, he replies, coming even with me so our reflections double in the brushed steel. You've been orbiting this floor since last night. Orbiting is romantic. I've been commuting. He looks past me at the seam. Up close. The air temperature dips, the way it does when you open a freezer and remember summer. He studies the wall like men study maps before they learn that terrain has opinions. You installed eyes on legal, I say, conversationally. Rude. I installed eyes on every department, he says. Equality. And yet your lens did linger. I nod toward the invisible camera. It lingered, he agrees, not blinking. Mr. Levin, I don't have time to be coy. If you're part of my leak, I'll find it. If you're the only person who can show me what this door is, you're going to do that. Either way, we're walking forward. We? I ask. Security, he says. And then, after a heartbeat. And you? I consider making him ask more nicely. Then I consider that I am the man who built a machine to hold a decade of silence, and that the silence is starting to think it's a person. The courtesy of it all has begun to feel like a lie. I slip off one glove. He doesn't gasp, points for discipline. He tracks the movement like it's evidence, which, in a sense, it is. The small tender part of me that makes doors remember how to open. My palm touches the seam, and the metal warms, as if I have named it in a language it forgot it knew. Whatever you think you're doing, he says. Quiet. You should be very sure. I'm never sure, I say. I'm just thorough. The lock clicks 1, 2, The rhythm of a heartbeat that found its metronome. A sliver opens. Air moves. A library exhale, paper and time, and the ghost of Rosemary I pretend is still soap, though both of us know better. He steps in closer, purely practical now. Ready to move if something moves at us. How? The way everything in this building works, I say. Policy and faith. You coded it. I shouldn't like the respect in his voice. I do. I drafted it. I correct. Coding is a kind of drafting with more brackets. I pull the door the length of my arm. The darkness beyond is careful, rather than hungry. The lights stir the way my name stirred the lock, slowly, as if they've been asleep since someone told them sleep would save lives. We slip inside, together. He stays 3 inches behind me, which is either tactical or considerate. The heavy hush lands across my shoulders with the weight of an old coat I had promised never to wear again. The room reveals itself in segments, shelving along 2 long walls, a table in the center with rubber feet, vents in the ceiling shaped like commas, as if the air itself is being advised to pause. Boxes line the shelves in orderly gray, the archival kind that persuade you to whisper. No blinking servers, no cash, no jewels. Only the dull treasure that changes cities, contracts, resolutions, minutes. Letters that never went out. Letters that did and ruined someone. Christopher takes 1 step forward and stops, the sound his shoe makes absorbed immediately by the room's good manners. He studies a label, as if it might sprout teeth. He reads aloud, and the way he reads changes the temperature of the air. Interspecies accord. Emergency drafts. His eyes move. Sense protocol. Enacted. Memory decrees. Sealed. A pause. These are yours. Some are, I say. My voice remembers being younger, and fails to sound like it. The tidy handwriting on the box spines is mine from a decade ago. Impatient and precise. Each letter buttoned up. Each slash of a T crossing the rest of the word like a little sword. Milo would call this cool. Ms. Park would call it illegal. I stand there and call it what it is. An apology stored in acid-free cardboard. Christopher takes another step. He doesn't touch the boxes. He knows better than to disturb how archivists knot their days. He looks at me instead, the way you look at a map's legend when the roads begin to make a bewildering sense. The camera's absence is a relief. The room is between us like a vow we haven't made yet. You built this, he says finally, voice low and clean. It is not an accusation. It is not praise. It is a sentence diagram, with me as the verb. The motion lights finish waking, soft as confession. The air smells faintly of paper and rain, and the underside of it, the one I haven't let anyone talk about in 10 years, tilts toward rosemary and ink. I let my bare hand fall to my side. I don't put the glove back on. The vault breathed, like something alive. And I knew. I'd built it. The archive keeps its own weather. Cold, careful air, white gold light that makes dust look like restraint. The shelves run in disciplined columns, metal ribs holding boxes with neat black letters, my handwriting from another life. Integra Accord, emergency drafts, emergency reform, implemented. Memory lock, sealed. Christopher doesn't touch anything. He reads. He has the posture of a man who learned to let his eyes go first, and his hands last. The silence between us is a thick, dignified thing that smells faintly of paper, and beneath it, there, it is again, the ghost of rosemary, the split second of rain on heat, the clean patience of ink drying. Start, he says. Not an order like last night. More like a surgeon rolling up his sleeves. You'll hate parts, I say. I already do, he says evenly. Then, I'll hate them accurately. I pick up a box labeled Accord, preliminary oathwork, and set it on the center table. The rubber feet squeak in a tone that sounds like guilt if you're listening. When I lift the lid, the smell rises, paper, graphite, binding glue, the metallic thrum of a thing that used to be hot. I was 26 when I drafted the first page, I tell him. There were 6 recorded deaths that week in 3 cities. That's just the recorded ones. HR had a vocabulary for it. Incidents, escalations, interspecies misunderstandings. I pull out a sheaf of vellum I used. Because the old words liked it better. The police had a worse one. Families had the worst. Christopher's jaw ticks, barely. Say what it was. A war in slow motion, I say. Not banners and battlefields, hallways, stairwells, parking lots at midnight when everyone was too proud to ask for an escort. I lay the vellum flat. The script is tight and severe. A ceremonial hand I taught myself from. Stolen scans of law codes and older things that never saw a court. The letters feel heavier than ink. That is the point of them. You wrote a document, he says. And the city changed. Not just a document. I tap a line where the letters are punctured with pricks from a needle. A contract that could be signed by the building itself. A binding laid in a language older than ours, and familiar to what we are. He looks up at that. Magic. Law, I say. And then allow. And its impatient sibling. How? I swallow. The cold here makes it easier, keeps the throat from burning with old heat. The old oath tongues don't care about metaphors. They care about exchange, so I offered one. We would trade the volatility of scent for the stability of memory. Instinct would be replaced by the record of choices made. Replaced is the wrong word, I correct myself. Subordinated. Tempered. So that a slammed door felt like a slammed door, not a war horn. He watches me. He's very good at it. And you ask the building to agree. I wrote the building into it. Sensors, vents, thresholds, the stairwell that always knows when you lying to yourself because it counts steps differently on the way up. Every place our bodies flare, I put a witness there. And then I gave it rules, where to soften, where to cool, when to file the memory instead of the reaction. You made us blind. The sentence lands like a diagnosis. It's not the first time I've heard it. It still finds a new place to bruise. I made you safe, I say. My voice is even. It has a chair. I was tired of drafting condolences. I was tired of watching HR argue whether bite marks were culture or injury. I wanted the children in accounting to be able to cry in the bathroom without setting off a building. His gaze doesn't move, but something in it does. A thin pulse of heat under snow. You made yourself God. God would have asked for a tithe, I say. I asked for time. The truth unhooks itself in my throat and comes out simple. It was supposed to be 5 years. Enough to teach better reflexes, rewrite a few scripts, make the bad habits stale. And then people liked the quiet. I set down the vellum because my hands are steadier if they're empty. Executives liked the numbers. HR liked the form letters. The board liked not being sued by dead men's mothers. Every quarter the emergency became the plan. And the word sticks. It has barbs. I was good at maintaining it. So, you kept the lock, he says. Not cruel. Precise. I kept it because we weren't ready to take it off without biting each other again, I say. That's the part I tell myself when I want to sleep. The other part is that once you build a thing like this, it doesn't stop at your hands. It runs on everyone's fear. It runs on their relief. He could say a lot of things. He doesn't. And the memory lock? I slide another folder out. Memory decrees. Witnesses. Names in legal lines. Ms. Parks, among them. Mine. 3 others who left or died. You can't put a spell like this in a public ledger. It would be weaponized in a week. I wrapped the story in something only a handful of us could open. The building remembered access. I remembered why. Everyone else remembered quiet. His eyes skim the list, then lift back to me. Why am I smelling you? I didn't mean to. It slipped out last night like a secret that lost its footing. The wordless note of rain and rosemary and the pale metallic of ink. It's gentler now. As if embarrassed. Because someone tried to break it, I say. Not open. Break. They jabbed at the lock with a tool that speaks a different language. It rattled the frame and shook me loose. I tapped my chest once. Woke the part that signed. Val, he says. Most likely, I allow. Kincaid doesn't build. They buy. And what they couldn't buy, they took. He knows this vault exists or guesses it does. He wants the shape of the accord. Doesn't understand that if you drag it into light without the apology inside it, it turns to smoke. He paces one measured line of the aisle and back again, like he's testing the friction of the floor. You did this, he repeats, softer, And then, as if he owes himself the truth without euphemism, "You did this to me." I look at his hands. He holds them like a man who has learned to unmake fists. "I did this for you," I say. I do not add, "and for the boy in records, and for the woman in compliance, and for the alpha, who cried in a janitor's closet after he realized his own body was a poorly moderated weapon." He doesn't need my parade of the righteous dead. If I could have built an accord that spared us without silencing us, I would have. I didn't know how. I still might not. He leans on the table with both palms. Careful. The light cuts his profile into metals. "What did it cost you?" he asks. It's almost gentle. "The first question today that's about me and not the city." "Names," I say. The old language takes names as collateral. It keeps a copy. For a long time I couldn't smell anyone, not just like the others. I force a small smile. Lawyers are good at neutrality. I became excellent. He studies my face, like the answer might try to hide there. Something in his shoulders loosens by a quarter inch. "I thought I was broken," he says. "For years. That I'd burned up the compass, and I was walking with a dead magnet pointing at nothing." "You weren't broken." I hold his gaze. "You were domesticated. There's a difference. One you didn't choose." The flicker that passes through his expression is anger, yes, but also a weary kind of gratitude. Feeling men get when the thing that hurt them finally has a shape to point at. He breathes out. It's not a sigh. It's a permission slip. He nods toward the box. "Show me the clause that tastes like blood." I turn pages. He watches my fingers follow lines like rosary beads. I find it, a paragraph in a square hand, margins packed with the kind of notes the living write to the dead. Proximity override in cases of civil unrest. It reads like a calm man in a burning room. It is the clause that throttled a whole species down to office appropriate. He reads it, mouth tightening. "You made it harder for us to smell each other in crowds, in protest, in fear." "I made it harder for us to make a crowd out of a pack," I say. "Packs are beautiful, until they are not." Spoken like a man who's never been saved by one. I swallow the retort that wants to show him the scar under my shirt, where being saved felt like drowning. He doesn't need my autopsy. He needs my confession. "I'm not asking for absolution," I tell him. "I'm telling you the instructions, because the machine is stuttering, and if it fails, without a plan, it will do what machines do. Revert to its oldest programming. Teeth." He stands there with his hands flat on the table, and looks at me, genuinely, as if the brief he is reading has a pulse. The room sounds like breathing made into architecture. He steps closer, not looming, close enough to share the same rectangle of white gold light. "What now?" "Now we write a new document," I say. "One that doesn't pretend scent is sin. One that gives people rooms to breathe, and rules with teeth that are pointed at consent, not throats. One that tells the building when to open the windows, and when to cool the blood." "And veil?" "We arrest him with paperwork," I say. "The only kind that sticks." His mouth does that not quite smile that feels like a truce discovering it enjoys itself. "You're asking me to partner with the man who turned off my nose. I'm asking you to help me turn it back on, without turning on the sirens." For a moment, we just stand there, the space between us honest for once. My pulse has opinions about his proximity. I let them file a memo, and then ignore it. He inhales, and I feel the question in it. The way something inside him, the compass he thought was dead, twitches toward north. "Will it hurt?" he asks. "Yes," I say. "We'll call it adjustment. And we'll give it chairs and tea." He huffs a quiet laugh, looks down at the vellum, looks back at me. In his eyes is the look of a man deciding to step onto ice knowing he can swim. "All right, Mr. Levin," he says. "Draft with me." I nod once. The relief is small and specific. A light going on in a hallway you never let yourself walk. I pick up a pen out of habit and put it down again. The new thing deserves a different ink. He reaches past me to close the box. The sleeve of his suit brushes my bare wrist. "It's nothing. It's a spark. It's a room remembering a window." I slide the lid home and seal it with the palm that made this room breathe in the first place. My voice comes out steady because I have practice. "We don't have long." "Why?" He asks. Because the pressure is building, I say. And then, the piece I didn't want to give words. Because words make things stand up. If the scent returns, the war will too. The conference room on 12 is where dignity goes to pick a fight with fluorescent lighting. Glass walls, hollow core table, chairs that make everyone's posture look defensive. Kincaid's logo sits on a guest badge by the carafe like a roach in daylight. Alec Vale is already in the room when I arrive, because of course he is. He faces the skyline as if he installed it. Navy suit the color of expensive denial. A wristwatch that could report your sins to a satellite. He turns at the click of the door, and smiles with the precision of a cut. Noa, he says, like we share a secret worth polishing. You still make nights look underdressed. Alec, I reply. You still confuse volume with value. We shake hands because adults are violent politely. His grip is the same. Warm. Curated. He leans in a fraction past cordial, scavenging whatever scent lives in the gap between our collars. He finds very little. My life is good at hiding. Kincaid's liaison starts the dance of PowerPoint. Arrows becoming circles, becoming bullets designed to shoot thought. I take my seat, legal pad open, pen parked like a scalpel. Across the table, Alec watches me the way poachers watch watering holes. Christopher slips in a minute late and takes the chair at my right, a quiet fact. He nods once to the room, then once to me, the second one smaller. His presence changes the gravity at our end of the table. Things fall toward us, or away more honestly. We're thrilled to explore collaboration, the liaison says. A strategic knowledge exchange, non-binding at first, mutually beneficial. Non-binding is a hobby, I say pleasantly. We prefer relationships that survive breakfast. Milo is at the wall with the assistant's clipboard, and the look of a boy observing a lion exhibit from inside the enclosure. Miss Park lurks near the door, knitting in her mind. Alex steeples his fingers. We admire your cultural innovations, he says. The way your organization reduced, volatility. Volatility is a market term, I say. People don't volatilize. They bleed. Christopher's attention narrows and centers. The rest of the room fades in the useful way noise fades when something sharp needs to be heard. Alec's smile deepens by half a cruelty. You were always good with words. I remember being good at choices, I say. Words are the residue. He laughs, low. Do you remember the stairwell at West Annex? I don't look at Christopher. I remember a lot of stairwells. They all teach you the numbers going up and down aren't the same. Alec's gaze drops to my gloves on the table, unused. You're still hiding your hands. I'm still keeping your teeth off them, I say, and flip my legal pad to a new page. The liaison continues to present synergy like penance. I take notes with the little, disciplined handwriting that used to make Alec tilt his head and say sign here more often than he meant the contract. The memory tries to rise like a fish at the surface. I let the water stay still. When the meeting adjourns for a coffee break, the room spills toward the kitchenette like it's a confessional. Ms. Park intercepts the liaison with a question about the legality of optimism. Milo beelines for pastries with the integrity of a comet. In the corridor, Alec catches me by the elbow, lightly, like a man checking the weather. Walk with me. I'm on coffee, I say. You can walk with me, if you can keep pace. We do a slow loop, glass on one side showing the spine of the city. Framed awards on the other showing the spine of our self-regard. He moves like a man narrated by good lighting. Kincaid wants what you have, he says, soft enough for the glass to keep the secret. They'll pay well. They'll worship it with buzzwords. They'll even pretend they came up with it. Why tether yourself to a building that doesn't know what it owes you? What does Kincaid think I have? I ask. An accord, he says, tasting the word. The switch. The hush. Whatever you called it when you invented a new species of corporate peace. I called it an emergency, I say. We're still in it. He glances over his shoulder at the kitchenette, where Christopher is talking to Miss Park, with the respectful dislike two generals feel when they realize they're on the same side. The new dog, Alex says, has a nose. He'll catch your scent. If he does, he'll follow it to the place I stand, I say. Then we'll choose. Always so noble. Alex's smile tilts. Do you still say the old words at night? Do you still say your own name in the mirror? I ask, slowly, just to check it hasn't changed. His eyes flash with the pleasure of being struck. We were good, he says. Don't rewrite. We were loud, I say. Loud and hungry, and convinced that appetite was destiny. That's what made it honest. That's what made it a hazard zone. We near the corner where glass turns into the matte privacy of the stairwell door. The metal remembers my palm, my skin remembers everything. I stop before touching it, and let the ache be academic. Is this where you tell me you're sorry? He asks. For what? I say, for turning it all off. I look at him then. Really look. Like I'm drafting a document with his face. He has aged into the kind of handsomeness that markets itself, a touch of silver at the temples. Fine lines that look like experience when you don't know their names. Under the polish, impatience, and under that, hunger, and under that, a boy who learned the wrong lesson from the first time a room listened when he spoke. I'm sorry for the funerals, I say. And for the quiet that replaced the grief we should have had. I am not sorry for the years without blood. So pragmatic, he murmurs. You always were. You wrote a cage and called it ethics. Ethics are cages we choose, I say. You prefer the kind other people carry for you. He laughs. The sound finds a crack in the corridor's good manners, and slides under it. Kincaid will make you an offer anyway, he says. They'll ask you to draw the shape of the thing so their engineers can trace it. They'll flatter you with titles. You'll love their words. They don't have a building that will sign, I say. Or a city that will survive the beta draft. He leans in, close enough that the 10 years ago part of my body flickers like a bad light bulb. Then give me the key, he whispers. I can translate. You never learn to translate, I say. You learn to take. The silence that follows is the kind knives respect. He lets it sit, and then plucks its string. Do you know what Mara calls you? I keep my posture neutral, my pulse doing its little drumline in the pit. Mara calls me by my name. She calls you the apology, he says. Like you apologized so loudly, we forgot to ask for anything else. That's not what she calls me, a voice says behind him, and Alec goes very still in the way men do when a story they thought was theirs speaks. Mara steps up, calm as rain, when it has decided to be tender. She's in a cream sweater and slate skirt, no jewelry, hair pulled back, the way people do when they want their necks to tell the truth. In her eyes, a polite border, and behind it, a country that has survived. Alec, she says. The liaison wants you. She looks at me, and the polite border softens by a degree. Do you have a minute? Alec's jaw says he'd like to say no. His smile says yes. Of course. He touches her elbow. She does not lean in. Don't go far, Noa. I never do, I say, which is a lie. He peels off toward the kitchen. Mara watches him leave, then exhales like a woman setting down a box that looked lighter than it was. He thinks she'll open the vault if he presses long enough, she says. And you think? I think he doesn't understand that the lock wasn't built to open for need, she says. It opens for contrition. The word makes a small, traitorous ache. The old syllables love it. Why tell me? Because he'll hurt people to prove a point, she says plainly. And because the thing you built, whatever it is, worked. It gave me years where the world wasn't a knife. I don't want him selling the knife back to us as freedom. I study her face. Omega, yes. But there is nothing yielding about her spine. What does he want from you? What men like him always want, she says. Proof he's still the axis the room spins on. Is he? Not anymore. She smiles. Brief, almost private. And that threatens him more than your ethics ever did. Footsteps approach. The air changes the way it does when a storm looks at you. Christopher turns the corner, reads the situation in a glance. Alec, at the coffee, me too close to a stairwell, Mara standing like a thesis. The line of his shoulders eases when his eyes land on Mara's distance from Alec. He nods to her, then to me. Everything all right? He asks. Define everything, I say. Start with the part where he looks at you like theft, he says. Comforting, I mutter. Mara's mouth curves. He thinks he's the only one who can read a room, she says to Christopher. He isn't. Alec returns then, cup in hand, smile refurbished. He takes in the geometry, who stands where, who breathes what, and places himself at a distance that looks respectful on camera, and not at all in person. Kincaid will be in touch, he says to all of us, and none. We're very excited about mutual growth. Shame, Miss Park says, arriving with a scone like a verdict, that tumors call it that too. Alec's smile chips. He looks back at me, lets the mask slip for one sentence said almost kindly, which is how knives say they were friends first. You can't keep a cage locked forever, he says. Especially when you're the one inside. Ms. Park's office is what the apocalypse looks like when it files quarterly reports. Color-coded folders tower like polite cities. A whiteboard lists tasks in a hand so precise. It could slice bread. 3 inbox trays are labeled sins, reparations, and lunch. The plant in the corner is thriving out of fear. She doesn't look up as we step in, Christopher, Milo, and me, as if she scheduled our entrance and refuses to reward punctuality. If anyone dies, she says, uncapping a red pen like a dagger, I am not filling out the sick leave. Milo nods with the solemnity of a courtroom oath. Yes, ma'am. Death will be handled off book. Good. She flicks the red pen toward a chair. Sit. And stop breathing like fugitives. It fogs my glass. Christopher stands instead, a quiet monolith, absorbing daylight. He tries to lean against the filing cabinet. The cabinet rejects him with a metallic squeak. Don't touch that, Ms. Park says without looking. It holds grudges. I take the seat, cross one ankle over a knee, and watch Milo attempt to look ordinary while vibrating like a hummingbird with secrets. His backpack, overstuffed, morally compromised, bulges in a way that suggests both snacks and felonies. Report, Ms. Park says. 2 things. Christopher answers, concise as a radio. Kincaid's consultation is a stalking horse. Vale is sniffing around restricted infrastructure. And we believe someone attempted a brute force bypass on a sealed asset. Ms. Park makes a notation under sins. Actionables? Containment and proof, he says. At the word proof, Milo makes the sound of a man swallowing an entire alphabet. I tilt my head. Milo? He freezes. Sir? Do you have something to confess to the dragon? I ask, mild. Ms. Park finally looks up. Her gaze could tidy a room at 50 paces. If you stole from security again, at least say you did it with grace. I didn't steal, Milo says, now bright red. I relocated, temporarily. For audit. From whom? Christopher asks. Milo unzips his backpack with the reverence of a magician showing the hat is empty, then produces a small, black flash drive pinched between 2 fingers. I found this under the conference table. Right where Mr. Vale was, man-spreading. You waited to tell us because... I prompt. Chain of custody, he says quickly. I was working up the courage to have a chain. And custody. Christopher takes the drive, turns it once between thumb and forefinger, then sets it on Miss Park's blotter without flinching, when her plant rustles disapprovingly. Lovely, she says. I'll have compliance make it cry. Milo exhales, like a balloon committing to maturity. Thank you. Don't thank me, she says. Thank the janitor whose vacuum didn't eat your evidence, because I bribed it with a paperclip. Christopher straightens again, and tries, God bless him, to look like he belongs in an office. He reaches for a mug on Miss Park's credenza. The mug reads I do process. He picks it up. The pen inside slides, clatters, ricochets off the credenza, and vanishes. Under a bookshelf that hasn't acknowledged the outside world since 2009. Leave it, Miss Park says. It's happier now. He sets the empty mug down, as if he meant to audit it. I can't help it, I smile. You're terrible at undercover civilian, I tell him. I'm excellent at it, he says, affronted. Observe. He sits. The chair rolls 2 inches, and bumps his knee into the desk. He stops moving, deceived by furniture. Milo, delighted, whispers, You're like a cat, pretending it meant to fall. Christopher pretends not to hear. We'll need to mirror legal's night logs to a clean server, he says to Miss Park. If Vale's wormed anything, it's the audit trail. Already done, she says. I did it yesterday while the CFO mispronounced fiduciary. She taps the flash drive with her pen. This will give us receipts. The only kind men like that respect. We move back to the department to act normal, which, for us, means behaving like no one has ever Googled how to detect a keylogger with a stapler. Milo posts up at his desk, headphones on, typing with the ferocity of a woodpecker. Miss Park stalks the floor distributing tasks and threats with equal efficiency. Christopher makes a valiant attempt to blend. He collects a stack of manila folders and walks them from one desk to another, as if delivering paper could trick the building into believing he works here. On folder 3, he hesitates in front of the copier, studies its touchscreen, like a bomb, and presses a button with exaggerated care. The copier emits a deep ecclesiastical hum, and begins producing 50 copies of the coffee club sign-up sheet. Miss Park appears beside him like a moral consequence. No, I pressed. You invited it, she says, and taps one button. The copier repents immediately. I'm laughing before I intend to. Christopher cuts me a look that says, save me, and do not ever bring this up. I'm only teasing, I say, standing at his shoulder to cancel the remaining prints. Every man must confront the machine that measures him. It started it, he mutters. Copiers always do, I agree. Our shoulders almost touch. It's nothing. It's a weather report. The building notes it, and decides not to panic. He glances at me sideways. I assume you can make it collate blessings. I can make it notarize your soul, I say. But the fee schedule is brutal. Later, he says softly, which has no business sounding the way it does. We return to motion, emails, soft pings, the clatter of keyboards composing wars and truces. For a few minutes, the department feels almost ordinary. Like we're just people in a room trying not to spill coffee on a lawsuit. Then the air changes. It's subtle. The kind of shift you feel in a field right before the rain realizes it's coming. I look up. Mara stands at the threshold, neutral as a new page. She's carrying a small velvet pouch the color of a courtroom's carpet, and she holds it with the care you give to things that shouldn't belong to you but do for one precise moment. Miss Park, she says. Noa? Christopher is already turning, reading posture and intent, as if they were printed in bold. Miss Park materializes from wherever dragons wait between breaths. Did you bring me a head or a scone? She asks. A key, Mara says. She crosses to my desk and unties the pouch. What spills into her palm is not a key the way doors understand them. It's a sliver of engraved steel, with a notch pattern that matches nothing mechanical, edges, etched with a filigree of characters that have not been spoken aloud here in 10 years. I feel the hair along my arms rise like witnesses. Where did you? I start. From his safe, she says simply. He left it in my custody, the way men leave apologies, carelessly. It's a copy, but copies can open old habits. Christopher takes it without touching her skin, the care he uses with evidence and people identical. He looks at me over the small, bright fact in his hand. The Accord Vault, he says. Yes, I answer, and my voice is steady for the first time today. Now we have proof, and a door to open on purpose. The storm found the building before we did. Lightning stitched the skyline in quick white seams, and the windows of 23 vibrated the way glass does when it's thinking about singing. The hallway held its breath. Even the motion sensors seemed to wait for the weather to choose a verb. We came in a 4-beat. Ms. Park saw us to the elevator with a blessing that sounded like a threat, and then vanished to misdirect security. Milo carried a backpack with the earnest gravity of a ring-bearer. Mara walked beside me like a calm argument. Christopher took point, the kind of leadership that doesn't announce itself because the air already knows. The unnumbered corridor receives certain people like a confession booth. No ceremony, just the sense that the room was expecting you. The seam door wore its usual indifference, but the metal under my glove felt warmer than it had last night, as if it had remembered an old fever. Last chance to turn this into a strongly worded email, I said. Milo, hushed and starry-eyed, I like emails, but This is cooler. Christopher's mouth tilted almost smile. The storm flared. His profile was cut into metals again. Do it, he said, not unkind. Before we collect more witnesses, then clauses. I peeled off my gloves. No theater. Just a quiet exhale of skin that had learned a decade of restraint. The first touch of my bare palm called up the scent that lives under my name. Rain on heat, rosemary crushed between fingers, ink deciding to be permanent, and the lock loosened with that soft, obedient sound that makes the chest feel like an unlocked drawer. The door moved, not open, awake. The lights inside lifted from sleep into a white gold that tasted like paper and discipline. I could feel the accord's architecture press its face to the crack, like a dog hearing a familiar step on the other side. Mara slid the copy key from her pocket, steel, engraved with old characters, and set it against the notch the way you set a violin's pitch. The filigree on the blade caught the stormlight and threw it in polite patterns on the wall. Ready? She asked. Never, I said. Always. We stepped through. The archive breathed the way it did the first night. Air moving in commas, shelves like ribs, boxes with their neat black labels. But the storm changed the room's body. Lightning pulsed under the white gold, the way blood pulses under skin when a fever learns to be useful. The scent rose like a tide coming back to a beach that had been paved. I moved to the center table. Christopher flanked me. Milo kept to the outer ring, a satellite with an avocado-shaped stress ball in his pocket, because he had learned that even comets like something to hold. Mara stayed near the door, a guardian who understood that loyalty sometimes means being the person who shuts it. What do you need? Christopher asked, low. A witness who won't flinch, I said. A room that forgives. And the old words. He didn't flinch. He rested his knuckles on the table's edge, the same way he'd rested them when we read the first drafts, as if to tell the pages they didn't have to be brave alone. I placed my palm flat on the vellum cover of Integra Accord, emergency drafts, and spoke, a syllable that doesn't translate into English because English likes its contracts quiet. The white gold deepened, and the room blinked. Memory isn't film. It doesn't spool. It arrives in fragments with edges. The first shard was the stairwell at West Annex. The heat that clawed the exit sign, the sound of a breath hitching when an Omega dropped a stack of files, and 6 alphas forgot they were in a building with fire suppression and not a forest in an old story. Then, the boardroom where men with expensive pens voted with their teeth hidden. Then, Ms. Park's pen pressing through the paper as she wrote witness next to her own name. Then my hand, younger and steadier than it had any right to be, pricked with a needle to sign the kind of contract the air reads. My throat did the old ache. The scent in the room thickened, and I felt rather than saw Christopher's shoulders lower, by a fraction, like a dog hearing the end of a siren and knowing the house is still standing. A noise shivered the door, not the polite noise it makes when friends arrive. The other kind. Christopher's head turned. He was motion before I registered the shape in the crack. He pushed Mara gently aside, took the door's edge with one hand, and let it open as far as he chose. Alec Vale slid in like a rumor that forgot to whisper. He wore the smirk designed by marketing, the suit tailored by rage, and a look at me that tried to be fond and landed on acquisitive. Behind him, the storm made flattering choices. His gaze caught on the lights, then on the boxes, then, hungrily, on the copy key in Mara's fingers. You locked away the truth, he said, soft so it would carry. No, I said, something in me settling because the line had been waiting for its match. I kept it until we deserved it. He laughed like a man unwrapping a weapon. You think you get to make that call? I did once, I said, and I hated being right. Christopher moved to place himself half a step between us, not blocking, redrawing the geometry so that if anything took a bite, it would bite him first. He didn't look back, but I felt his attention split, one half on Alec's hands, one half on my breath. Alec, Mara said quietly. Her voice pulled his eyes to her like gravity. Don't. Stay out of the adult conversation, he said without looking at her again. She didn't flinch. He'll use you as a receipt, she told me. If he can't have the accord, he'll sell the story of how he almost did. Fewer returns that way, Miss Park would have said, if she were here. Alex stepped further in. The storm cracked, light chasing itself across the ceiling. He lifted a small device in his palm. Smooth, plausible, ugly, and the hair at my nape rose. Jammer, Christopher said. Translator, Alec corrected, smiling. Everything speaks if you listen with enough money. He pressed his thumb to it. The archive reacted the way bodies do when you make a joke in the middle of certain funerals. The white gold stuttered, turned thin at the edges, and then surged hard. In the opposite direction. As if the room remembered it could be a heart. The scent pressure spiked, first rain, then 1,000 unpracticed notes, like a choir forgetting the key, and then finding it all at once. My ribs widened, my eyes watered. Somewhere in the building, a copier hiccuped, apologized, and printed 10 extra pages. Turn it off, Christopher said, already moving. Alec backed toward the boxes, like a man backing toward a cliff he thinks is a stage. Make me, he said, and for a moment I saw the boy under the suit. The one who learned that hunger gets results, and no one taught him where to put it. Christopher closed the distance, like he'd been designed in a room where people understood momentum. He knocked Alec's wrist with a neat, hard efficiency. The device flew, hit the edge of the table, and skittered under a shelf. Milo launched himself like a heroic raccoon and landed on it, clutching it to his chest. Got it. He yelled, far too triumphantly for a boy under a storm's worth of magic. Alec swung. Christopher took it on the shoulder, with the softness of a man calibrating his own strength. He returned a strike precise enough to be polite. Alec hit the shelf and made the boxes shiver without falling. Mara didn't move, because she knew there are moments where stepping in turns into stepping on. I moved to the table to steady the vellum because I know what happens when bindings tear. The accord woke fully. There is no other way to say it. The letters on the vellum breathed. The shelves exhaled. The vents exhaled. The building exhaled. And scent, our old language, ran down the elevators and through the vents and along the carpet at ankle height, and into the open mouths of office plants, and sat in the throat of the stairwell, like a story finally told. On 9, a junior analyst paused at her desk and cried, a quiet, relieved sound that tasted like peppermint and grief. In the lobby, the night guard laughed without knowing why. On 15, 2 engineers turned toward each other, and then away, and then toward again, blushing like teenagers who found their names in a book. In the copy room, the machine relaxed, and printed exactly what it was told. Here, in the vault, the surge smelled like what we are when we're honest, rain and pine sap, and hot metal and clean skin, and the paper ink rosemary of a contract written against a war. Alex stared around him, wild for a second, like a man realizing the ocean is deep. You can't, he started, and then saw Mara properly, saw the refusal in her, saw what choosing looks like when it isn't about him. He made a poor choice. He lunged for Milo. Christopher was already moving, but the room moved faster. Pressure lifted off my chest and into my hand. The old syllables rose unsummoned. I spoke one like a gavel. The white gold dropped into a hard, simple tone, and Alex's knees buckled, as if someone had pulled the thread that keeps balance looking noble. He hit the floor without breaking anything but his certainty. Milo scrambled back on hands and sneakers, clutching the device so hard it might qualify as prayer. Christopher pinned Alec with enough weight to suggest humility, not harm. Mara turned her face away. The small mercy you offer a man old enough to know better. He made his choice, she said softly. Security thundered in the hall. Our security, the kind Miss Park could call by name and clause. 2 officers took over, their hands trained and careful. The storm outside spent itself against the glass with less interest, as if the building had made its own weather and the sky was taking notes. Christopher rose, breathing hard. His tie had abandoned its knot, and his hair looked like it had been given an opinion. He handed the device to me, without letting go of my eyes. You all right? He asked. Yes, I said, though my hands shook with relief and old biology. You. Better than I've been in 10 years. We stood there, in the living hush, the accord humming itself back from the edge into something sustainable. The scent in the room steadied. It learned to be less storm and more season. He took one step closer, then another, not looming, not demanding, simply entering the radius of whatever we had just done together. In his face, the weary relief of a soldier returned to a city that still stands. In mine, if I had to guess, a matching thing, minus the uniform. The old contract is awake, I said. We can't pretend it never existed. No, he said. But we can decide what it does next. His chest lifted, fell. It looked like work and felt like ease. He tilted his head slightly, as if making sure I had the room I always ask for and never take. Then make a new one, he said, breath still running hard from the fight, words clear as a vow offered and not demanded. With me, morning found the vault with the door open and the lights unafraid of themselves. Day slid down the glass and pooled across the table, turning the vellum warm and the pens into small bright instruments instead of weapons. The boxes on the shelves looked less like ribs and more like books in a good house. We worked with the windows of the day thrown wide. Not literal windows. 23 prefers its weather contained, but the kind you make when you stop whispering. Miss Park set a tray down between statutes and tea, a teapot the color of common sense, 4 chipped mugs, with former lives in other departments, and a plate of scones that were either fresh or immortal. Milo placed the avocado stress ball in the middle like a ceremonial fruit. Mara took the chair near the door and watched the room the way you watch someone. You love sleep. Calm, alert, ready to intercept dreams that break bad. Christopher sat at my left, sleeves rolled, tie abandoned, the right shoulder tender from last night and defended by stubbornness. He wrote with a neat, spare hand. The margins of his notes read like orders and apologies. I drafted, he counter-drafted. Miss Park murmured clause numbers like rosary beads. Milo Googled case law and squeaked when precedent behaved. Mara read for harm the way I read for loopholes. This is the first time a lawyer saved the world with paperwork, Milo said at one point, eyes heroic. Please don't make it a habit, Ms. Park replied, pouring tea with the precision of a judge's gavel. The new accord began as a list of things we refused to lie about anymore. Voluntariness. Suppressants offered, not required. No discipline for choosing either way. Rooms to breathe. Scent-neutral spaces and scent-safe rooms mapped and open, not rumors passed on in whispers and favors. Consent with teeth. Protocols for proximity, for negotiation, for failure. Penalties that bite the right thing. Abuse, not the wrong. Existence. Shared language. A right to name what you are without HR turning your pronouns into a pink slip. Witnesses. Real ones. Not just cameras. People with training and authority and empathy, rotating, paid, thanked. Sunset and dawn. A clause that mandates review and expiration. So nothing stays, because inertia, learn to call itself wisdom. Add a preamble, Christopher said. Not the kind that shouts. The kind that admits we did something drastic once, and are choosing not to again. I wrote. We were frightened, and made the world quiet. We are older now. We choose conversation. Mara leaned in. Include forgiveness, she said softly, eyes on the ink as if it were remembering her. Not absolution. Pathways to make amends. Restitution, Ms. Park translated. Approving. With receipts. Receipts I can generate, Milo said, practically humming. I glanced at Christopher. He was already watching me. Not in the way men sometimes watch to possess, more like a man checking a gauge he trusts. I let my knee angle toward his under the table. He didn't move away. You're leaving the old accord in place? Mara asked. No, I said. The word arrived gentler than I expected. We're acknowledging it. We're letting it retire with honors and honest criticism. We'll keep a version of the safety net, the one that cools a room when bodies forget themselves, but it won't be a muzzle. It will be a handrail while we learn our stairs. Christopher nodded, eyes on the clause where the building would be told when to breathe and when to open. Teach it to be a partner, not a warden. Teach us to be partners, I said. The building did what we asked. It's our turn. We wrote until the tea went cold and the scones grew philosophical. At some point security pinged to confirm Alec was in custody, and the device was resting in a bag that frightened it. At another, HR sent a draft memo titled, "Culture Updates with Clip Art of People Laughing." Around laptops, Ms. Park deleted it with the air of a woman preventing a second disaster. When the last signature line waited naked and patient, Christopher set his pen down and looked at me. The vault was quiet, in the way rooms are when they know there's a sentence left to say. "You first," he said. I signed my name in the ceremonial hand I had used a decade ago, the one that knows every letter by heart and bows to its own gravity. It didn't taste like blood this time. It tasted like rain and ink, and a metal that remembered holding. It tasted like letting go without dropping anything. He signed after me, his script lean and legible, a soldier writing a letter home that also instructs a city to stand down. Ms. Park added her witness, small and severe. Milo, hands shaking, printed his name as a junior witness with the kind of determination you wear when you're 20, and trying to make the world believe you mean it. Mara didn't sign. She pressed her fingertips to the margin, and gave it the kind of blessing that doesn't need a clause. "Now what?" Milo whispered. "Now we publish it," Ms. Park said, already opening a channel. Before anyone with clip art tries, I closed the folder. The vellum didn't fight. We climbed to the roof because the day had made a promise with the storm, and it felt impolite not to collect on it. The city below had the dazed look buildings wear after they remember they're made of people. The air still carried last night's scent in a low, steady music. Milo peered over the parapet and made the conducting motions of a boy orchestrating traffic. I keep expecting the skyline to, applaud. It already did, Ms. Park said. It showed up. She took the stair back down with Mara, leaving us with the wind. The sun was a rumor behind high cloud. The light was that particular bright gray that makes everything feel possible and a little ridiculous. Christopher and I stood by the guardrail, not touching until we did. The back of his hand found the back of mine, knuckles aligning like a claws clicking into its subclaws. No flinch, no fear. My glove stayed in my pocket. We didn't talk first. We breathed. The building breathed with us. The vents low, the door below open, the boxes full of apologies learning to be history. 10 years ago, I said, I thought saving everyone meant going silent. 10 years ago, he answered, I thought being strong meant not admitting I was deaf. We're terrible at gods, I said. We're good at people, he said. Takes longer. I turned my hand, he let me. Our fingers laced, unarmed and unhurried. He smelled like clean heat and cedar, and the leftover adrenaline of choosing well. If the city had a nose, it would have leaned into him too. He glanced at me, mouth quirking. Do you know what you smell like? I tried for glib, and found I didn't need it. Say it. You smell like home. The word moved through me without splintering. It found rooms, and opened them. It checked the locks, and turned them, polite as always. The last decade unclenched a little. Good, I said, letting him hear the relief, because I'm done being exile. He exhaled a laugh that had very little to prove. Was that the clause that needed a witness? I'll file it anyway, I said, for precedent. We watched the city be ordinary and miraculous. A courier on a bike cut a clean line through traffic. A woman with a red umbrella crossed against advice, and the world made room. Somewhere below, someone held a door, and someone else said thank you and meant it. Christopher's thumb stroked once across my knuckles. The gesture felt like a signature only the two of us would ever need to read. So, he said after a while, easy as weather. Dinner? Please, I said. I'm starving. For food? He teased. For not writing alone. He leaned his shoulder into mine until the world made sense around the pressure. Draft with me, he said, like a running joke that had decided to be true. Always, I said. The wind shifted, bringing the last clean taste of rain. We stood there in it, two men who had tried to control the weather, and finally learned to share it. The door below us opened to daylight, the papers drying in honest air, the new accord already at work in the deep parts of the building where habit lives. Home, I thought, and the building agreed.